So I'll start with two that came in right away and let Penny Gill answer them as she sees fit. The first one, and they're both short and simple. One is, how do we discern among or from legitimate and illegitimate fear? I think you mentioned a number of different kinds of fear. And so how do we discern legitimate and illegitimate fear? And I don't know if the people who ask these want to add to them, we're happy to do that, but there's another one that's somewhat on the same topic, and it says, at what point do we determine when a fear is no longer imagined but practical? Without defining this, I worry that our acting upon our actual or reasonable fears will happen when it's too late. Is acting on fears that don't yet endanger us a form of proactive planning? Is acting on fears that don't yet endanger us a form of proactive planning? Is it if someone wants to add to that or articulate that question, add to it, happy to have that.
Yeah. That's my question. I think the main part that I was wondering about is this spectrum in between fear being, and correct me if this is the incorrect vocabulary, but practical and impractical. And at what point do we say, okay, this is the time to act on this fear? And I worry that when we get to that point, when it's actually a fear that is affecting us personally, it's too late.
Great. So that, and then the other question of how we distinguish between legitimate and illegitimate fears. Let's begin there.
So that works. I can see you. That's better. Great questions. The second one, actually both of them. I have a good friend who's a powerful political person, Paula Green, who does spectacular conflict transformation work around the world. He's the founder of the Karuna Center in Amherst and then the founder of a whole lot of academic programs up at the School for International Training. I sent her my talk a couple days ago, and she came back with both of those questions. So you're right on the money. And I've been thinking about them. I had a long think in the car today. I think part of the discerning, that's one reason you need to be part of a group, is that I think fundamentally that's done best in conversation with a couple of people whom you trust and whom you've built up some really rich and deep, both intellectual and emotional connection with. Because in conversation, saying things out loud, what do you think about this? I'm really spooked about A. What's your sense about that? Is a way to begin, a way to inquire. My new favorite word for this thinking about this fear work has become curiosity. And it's not to just sit on a fear and see what the hell happens. And, that's terrible. We'll all be sitting here, with Armageddon happening. But what I'm trying to suggest is that when you see yourself with one of those narrative loops, a script that comes round and round and round, and it's really impacting how you feel about yourself in your relationships, in your studies, in your world, see if you can interrupt that script and back up a little bit and say, I'm just so curious about what's going to happen. Instead of going from A to Z, back up just a centimeter and say, I want to see what B is and then what C is. It doesn't take too many of those before you get a clear read of what the trajectory is. Then you talk to your little affinity group, and then you say, is this something we should act on? Is there somebody else who's tending to this? And so we should ask if they need support, or somebody else is already doing that, so we can tend to something else. So does that help, those two questions? So curiosity really helps, because that allows you to back up a little tiny bit and not get caught in the rush of that loop. That's my main thing tonight, is to help you recognize that you can't let your heart open if you're caught in those loops, in that storytelling you tell yourself. I had heard somebody who said the morning of November 9th, well, now we're going to have concentration camps in the United States. And I thought, really? How did she get there that fast, the morning of the 9th? I mean, I can imagine, but there's no way to fill in the blanks. It doesn't take account of anything you know about separation of powers, the rule of law, the Bill of Rights, the 200 years of fighting about these issues, blah, 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 blah. You know, we could think of 100 things that would have to collapse before there were concentration camps, again, in the United States. So it's that work. That's the work of discernment. That's the work of using your well-educated mind to engage on the issue and be a little skeptical, but allow yourself to be curious at how it's playing out. Okay? Does that get it? But I got this notion of continuum from Paula. I mean, I didn't get it from her. I figured it out trying to answer her criticisms, and which are your criticisms too. So I think I need to really think about the middle between those two endpoints of what, I can't remember what you called them. They were really neat. You had good names for them.
Imaginative versus practical? Is that
Now, practical and impractical, you said. Yeah, thanks, Roger. Practical and impractical. Practical and illusion. Another question?
Great, thanks.
So we have two questions that relate in different ways to the circle of care. They both sort of challenge it in different ways. So I thought maybe I'd read them both and you can respond to them. And if the people who ask the questions want to expand on them or again, I'm happy to have that. So just raise your hand and let me know. So one says, when you had us close our eyes and envision the people to which we belong, I struggled to have the courage to protect them because of structural hopelessness. How do you act productively and effectively when your loved ones face war, when the agenda of the U.S. government is unapologetically adamant on maintaining its hegemony in the Middle East, and when the U.S. dollar and global capital are backed by global dependence on oil? How do I act? Do you want to expand on that, or is that good? I think it's clear. And the other one was, what about courage to act on behalf of those who are not in our circle, or are prevented from being in our circle? Those who through walls and borders cannot enter the conversation that will ever be in our circle. So maybe you can answer both of those.
I think the second one's a little easier than the first. The first one is just the heartbreaker. I have a long connection with Bhutan and Nepal. I have some beloved Bhutanese and Nepali friends who are in my circle of care. I know their names and faces, and I have their email addresses. And in different ways, both countries have interesting problems, Nepal in particular. And I think I hold Nepal in my heart. I think when I meet a Nepali student, I immediately bring her into my circle of care. So I can have the abstract Nepal in my heart, and I can be prepared to act on behalf of something like that horrible earthquake 2 years ago. So I don't think it has to be only, my 5 dearest friends that I keep in close contact with. If it's easier for you to think of concentric circles with you in the middle, that's fine. So that's not so hard for me to figure out. The other one, I have a very beloved former student of mine who's a Syrian refugee and now has secure status in the United States, and He has brought his mother and 2 younger siblings to the United States. They're all in school. He's done a fabulous job. He's absolutely terrified. I don't know how to take care of what's happening in that whole complex. But it's a live issue for me. I mean, at the very simplest level, when Sam needs to support, I do it, obviously. But there's also a way that it makes the whole immigrant, refugee, borders, national security questions for me intensely personal, so that my heart is always open and engaged. I probably flinched when Roger read the question because I'm so alert to it. So I don't know, I can't fix American policy towards Syria. And, but I can keep talking about it, and I can support groups that try to lobby Congress, and we can do those things. We all have those things. We're citizens, we have access to things like that. But again, it's that old phrase for me, I guess this really tells you exactly which decade I belong to. Think globally. I would say let your heart be open globally, and then act locally. Protect a Muslim family that lives in your neighborhood. And do the local thing. And if all of us are doing local things, that turns into political power. It's very powerful political power. But I'd be lying to you if I said this was easy or satisfying. But it does connect to larger policy issues that are really up for grabs. I think we don't want to spend any more of the evening talking about the Trump administration, I don't think. But most of the things that they've tried to do in the last 2 weeks have been stopped or pulled back. The institutions are working, and I wasn't sure that they would work. It's only been 2 weeks. It would be easy for all of us to stop pressuring those institutions. Interesting article in the Times today about the attorneys general of a whole bunch of democratic states. If you haven't seen it, read it tonight. And it'll tell you something about the rule of law. It will tell you something about federalism, and it will tell you something about courts. And it'll make you chuckle if you're so inclined, because they've taken the Republican Tea Party strategy and they're using it. So the Republicans invented this, and now because, God is good.
I have some more questions, and I'm going to go to them, but are there questions that respond to anything of the first few questions and answers that people want to touch upon right away? Or happy to take verbal questions, so it's just not me and Penny talking all the time. Feel free. Yes. Stand up, please, and speak loudly.
All right. So at one point in your talk, you spoke about these systems that were designed to keep us lonely and uncourageous. And I wanted to ask if that was a matter of speaking for you, or how seriously do you take that idea of design? Because it seems to me that makes a huge difference in how we address our courage towards the issue. Because if we believe that there are sort of fat cats that are doing this to us, then we direct it towards them. But if it's a general systemic decentralized problem, then different sorts of courage are called for.
That's great, and you called me out, and I don't believe designed, but I believe that it is a welcome consequence, and that it serves to maintain these systems. That I'll tell you the truth, I don't think that what the folks you call the fat cats are that smart to figure out that long, complex causative loop. But I can see it working. And it's because the intervening variable, the intervening institution really is the market. And we know a lot about how markets work. And one of the things about a market is that you don't arrive as a person. You arrive, God help you, as a CV. You arrive as somebody who knows how to, with a particular skill, and you'll sell your skill for a particular price. That's how the market works. So the longer you are embedded in that kind of system, the harder it is to remember that you are also an infinitely more complex and delicate and powerful and courageous creature, right? But it does, and so that imperils your ability to be a critical, thoughtful, discerning, resisting person. Does that work?
Yeah, but if that's true, can you point to specific other societies that don't have a capitalist foundation that produce more courageous people?
Oh, don't get me wrong. I don't think we can get rid of capitalism. I think it would be, yeah, but we don't need this one. We don't need this version of capitalism. This is off the charts nuts. There are capitalist societies all over the world that are able to, that do not run every aspect of human life through the market. Healthcare, old age and senior care, the care of small children, the care of the environment, we can go and down the whole list. Only in America are all of those left to the marketplace. But nowhere in Europe. I'm woefully uninformed about South America, but even in South Asia, where there are very spotty kinds of economic development and modernization, they know better than to do that. So it's our form of capitalist economy that so undermines. And this isn't the moment to do it, but we could have a little riff right now about American exceptionalism and that Wild West character who thinks, he can do anything he wants anywhere, she can do anything she wants anywhere in the world. Those are linked together. I have to be allowed a self-indulgent sentence. After the election, I thought, one of the really great things is that American exceptionalism and all that crud is just in smithereens on the floor. And my friend said, what are you talking about? And I said, well, we have strutted around the globe for decades and generations saying, we know how to do democracy, we know how to do human rights, we know how to do civil rights, we know how to do melting pot, blah, 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 blah. And now the whole world knows we don't have a clue. It's wonderful. And that'll be really good in the long run.
This is sort of a crazy aside, but one of the most powerful people in the new administration has positioned himself as a critic of capitalism, or at least what he calls Ayn Rand capitalism that objectifies people and securitizes people on Wall Street. And that's Steve Bannon, who's calling for a return of Judeo-Christian capitalism. I wonder if I don't know if you looked at his speech at the Vatican at all and paid attention to that?
Just sent it to me. I haven't read it yet. But I understand he's also a Leninist. That he really praises Lenin because Lenin understood that it was a good time to destroy the state. I don't even know where to start. Give me another question.
Well, all right. It's worth checking out Bannon's speech he gave at the Vatican last year, in 2014. It's a fascinating speech. There's another question on capitalism here. And you may have already answered it, but maybe you want to just, maybe it brings something else up. How in practice can one courageously and not hypocritically fight against, work outside of, or undermine capitalism? And you've already said you don't want to, but maybe when we have been conditioned to find so many comforts and conveniences within that system, how do we break out? I mean, I don't know if that's something you want to respond to.
How do we break out? Well, the number one thing is to get very skillful at distinguishing between wants and needs. And that maximizes your freedom. Because there are a lot of things, there are some things we need, I mean, there's no argument about that. But if you get really hooked into a great swirl of wants, you will never be free. It's a good thing. Work is a wonderful thing. I think it was Simone Weil said work is your love for the world made visible. So really, am I right? Yeah, I think so. It's a gorgeous thought. So work is not the problem, and even working in the marketplace is not the problem. It's being able to understand that that's what it is. I think the most blessed people in the world are people for whom their work that pays the rent is also the work that is their vocation. So it's not about undermining capitalism so much, is that it will be undermined by your not getting in lockstep, trying to ever make ever more money to satisfy ever more exhausting lists of wants. I think that's a really big thing.
There are other, we still have a couple more, but I'm also happy to take hands. So think about more questions. This is a slightly off the topic of that we've been talking about, but a great question. Would a panel speaking about psychedelics, in your opinion, benefit BARD? How is the stigma placed on said substances, psychedelics, impeded people from experiencing their benefits? It seems consciousness has been criminalized. BARD question.
I haven't a clue. I was such a straight college student. What do you think? Does BARD need psychedelics? Or just the panel on psychedelics? Which is it?
Or psychedelics. Okay, but yeah, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'm simply noticing that on college campuses, this activity does take place, and oftentimes people aren't even aware of what's happening to them. And this is an educational issue. It's not promoting the use of, it's just wanting to understand what it means when it happens. And I think that in and of itself can provide different windows of perception into the kind of issues about courage that we're talking about that I think is really needed.
That was yours.
Hold it up.
I think it's a fascinating question. And maybe if I say one thing or two, Penny will add to it. You know, on the one hand, we can think of substances of all sorts, be they addictive substances or psychedelic substances or simply narcotics, as escapes from a world that are, in a sense, we're not courageous enough to face, right? That's one, I think that's the more obvious way to think about it. And we all need such escapes, including work at times, especially if it's boring, menial work, or even exciting work can be an escape from a world we don't want to or are not courageous enough to face. On the other hand, and I think this is the thrust of your question, it may be at times that in order to get a new perspective on a world which seems inescapable, we need to force ourselves out of our comfortable zones and find new experiences. And there's lots of ways to do that. You can read an unexpected book. You can go to a lecture. You can hike a mountain. You can meditate. But one way might be to take a psychedelic substance. And I'm wondering, maybe if we frame it in that way, you want to respond or not?
Sure.
I'm going to take a real big leap since this has been a wonderful evening. I would, and yes, we all self-medicate, some of us more than others. And again, I think part of coming into your full integrity is to teach yourself, to learn from yourself about which versions of that and how much of those versions you can use in ways that are okay, and where the lines are, where it's not okay. And that's part of this, that's a really important dimension of discernment, is understanding what wrecks your game and what might enhance your game. So that's one thing. And that's that's a common task for your age group. So do it. The second aspect of it that comes to mind, Roger, is we haven't mentioned this, but there's a whole lot to say about this mind that so confuses us with its little narratives and its little pretenses and its fictions and its thises and that's. And every religious and spiritual tradition that I know anything about has some kind of path for learning more about how your mind works. And there are religious versions of that, and there are relatively non-religious versions of that. And becoming more aware of how your mind works is a powerful, powerful tool. And of course, I would argue that that as you learn more about both what your mind can do and what kinds of dead ends it will take you, because it does, and you become wiser about those things, you will find that you're much more able to respond from your deepest heart to whatever is happening. And that's the gold standard, is to try to calm that mind down, not entirely, but to recognize when it's playing tricks on you. And then to be able to kind of hold it off gently and allow a much deeper sense of self, a much deeper understanding of how you want your world to look and work. That's the thing. So I think I think many of us do a lot of experimenting with different ways of accessing different levels of our mind, different levels of consciousness. I think that's it might be the most profound human experience. That's possible. Falling in love is a version of that. Climbing a mountain is definitely a version of that. Struggling with a loved one's death is a powerful opening on that. So I would put it in that category, and then I'm very comfortable because it's being used on behalf of something that is extremely challenging and extremely difficult, which is to become familiar with how your mind works.
Yes.
So along those lines, my question is, because I think that there is a place to discuss academically effective drugs, but do you think that these conversations have the capacity to affect community and build community? We often hear a lot about narcotics, heroin, cocaine, these types of things flooding urban communities and really destroying communities, but we're talking about kind of the religious and spiritual experience of doing psychedelics in particular, right? As they've been described throughout history through a variety of cultures. Do we as academics have a responsibility to address their effect on my generation? That's my question.
Can we ask clarification? Are you talking about something like peyote for Native Americans and things of that sort? And how we as academics should talk about that anthropologically or experientially?
I mean, that is an example historically, but I think you can look as close as the 60s, where pot is a huge part of a community that was trying to organize itself and rethink the world. We were discussing how one escapes capitalism. And one of the ways that people attempt to do it, right, to grapple with this macro structure reality is through substance use. And we do it, we drink too much, or we eat too much, or we, shoot up, or we do these things. But is there a capacity there also with, especially mind-altering substances, to talk about spirituality in a way that is relevant to the 21st century, in a way that is relevant beyond some type of anthropological, historical outlook, but is actually about the here and now, about the Bard kid lighting up on Lifewood Lawn on 420 because that's what all the Bard kids do on 420, because that's a cultural moment in our group, in our age, in our moment. Is there an academic responsibility to try and address these concerns and to see if there is a community building aspect to them?
It's a wild question. I feel like I'm being interviewed to be the dean. I think we always have a responsibility to try to figure out the impact of things like that. That's a no-brainer. Everything is fair game on the campus. Everything is fair game for conversation. I feel strongly about that. You're asking a question of somebody who's never even smoked pot. I mean, I don't have a clue. But I think it's a really, really interesting way of, and you're very articulate about it. You've gotten me really intrigued. I don't know if it's an academic issue, but is it a Bard College responsibility to figure out some way to have a more public conversation about this? I don't know, but it sounds like it's on your agenda, and good luck to you.
Yes.
My question puts it a little bit more.
You just try and speak up as much as you can.
Oh, yeah, sure. So you made two really interesting distinctions in your talk. You talked about the difference between courage of mind and courage of heart. And then you talked about the difference between fear, sort of based on instinct, when you were talking about the lion and the grass, whatever, and fear that's sort of rooted in imagination. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the relationship between those two distinctions and sort of what happens as a result of those types of fear, those types of courage.
That's a good one. First, just let me correct myself a little bit, because I don't think there are two kinds of courage. I think courage arises out of a conversation or a connection between your discerning mind and your open heart. And however you envision that, however you talk about that, however you make that happen. But it's a combination of meaning and of being smart, insightful, aiming your action in a way that makes sense, okay? There are obviously many kinds of fear, and you don't need to do the discernment about that instinctive fear that we're hardwired for. Our body does it for us, and we just, we cooperate if we can. But it's the other kind of fear that, and we want to honor that. We want to respect that. We need that as individuals. It's how we, pick up a grandmother who's fallen down a flight of stairs. It's how we grab a child who's about to run across the street. We do a million things if we're alive that function on the tiger in the grass, the hardwired survival of me and mine. So I don't see that as problematic. But but the imagined fears can get more complicated, and that's why we have to be able to bring this to bear on it, so that we understand we're actually addressing something that's real and that is vulnerable to our activity, and that we understand, and that because it is a meaningful act we're about to take, it might be meaningful in part because of the people you care about and the people who care about you. That's, that's really the thing, the simple message of my talk tonight. It's not complicated, but it's just to recognize, to tease out that the main obstacle to our being courageous, to our being able to function fully as citizens with our full integrity, is our fear. It's not other things, it's our fear. So, I'd like to read, do you know who Clarissa Pinkola Estes is? She wrote Women Who Run with the Wolves. She's my women colleagues here are nodding. It's a wonderful book, you shouldn't miss it. But she got quite active towards early in the fall and was writing some good stuff. But here's just one paragraph that I wanted to give you. One of the most powerful actions you can do to intervene in a stormy world is to stand up and show your soul. To display the lantern of soul in shadowy times like these. To be fierce and to show mercy to others are acts of immense bravery and greatest necessity. And she gets it all into 2 sentences.
With that, I want to ask you all to join me in thanking Penny Gill. Let me just say 1 or 2 things. Well, first of all, this is Penny's recent book, What in the World is Going On? And it's really a wonderful book, and I recommend it for you, to those of you who've been inspired here. She is also going to be speaking in a more intimate gathering at 8:30, so in about half an hour, at Brown Residence Hall. I don't know where that is, but I'm hoping some of you do. And all of you who would like to sort of sit down and have tea and a reception with Penny and talk to her a little bit more intimately about some of these issues or others are welcome at Brown Residence Hall at 8:30. And please do join us and her. You should have on your table announcements about the next 2 talks in the Courage to Be series. Also, there will be a number of dinners that the fellows organize with my colleagues, Bard faculty, who come and have dinners at the RN Center and talk about courage in some way or another. And you'll be getting emails asking you to sign up to join us for those dinners if you'd like. They're not required, but people who've done them in the past have really valued them quite a bit. So, thank you all for coming. I hope this is a beginning of a semester-long inquiry and thought into what it means to be morally and politically courageous. Have I forgotten anything, Tina? No, we're good. Thank you all for coming, and we'll see you next time. Thanks very much.